Hi, I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story, where purpose-driven people like you learn how to craft and tell compelling stories to grow your revenue and amplify your impact. If you would like to clarify your story in under 30 minutes, visit me at businessofstory.com, because you gotta own your story to grow your brand.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture, I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands, people buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
About this time last year, I was driving back to my office from Tempe, Arizona, coming back from a teaching session I had just done at Arizona State University. I was sitting at a stoplight when I looked over and saw the funniest thing. There was this middle-aged guy in a gray suit with a lime green shirt and brown tie on, and he was outside of his office on his cell phone, apparently doing a deal. He was quite animated, but that's not what was unusual about it. What was funny was that while he was on his iPhone, he was also walking on the curb around a flower bed in the parking lot, like a tightrope walker. One foot cautiously placed in front of the other, with his free left hand raised above his shoulder, balancing himself. What cracked me up about this visual was I actually saw two people in this guy, that gray-haired executive doing a deal on his iPhone, while his 12-year-old self navigated that concrete curbing around the yellow verbena. It occurred to me at that moment that regardless of our age, we're all still kids, just cloaked in our worn and wrinkled adult selves. That's why I'm so excited about today's guest. He is a master at offbeat children's storytelling that appeals to all of us. Lucas Keijning is an exhibition developer at the world-renowned NEMO Science Museum in Amsterdam. I met Lucas in June when I was in Holland for our annual field trip with our students from the Executive Masters of Sustainability Leadership program at ASU. We spent a day with Lucas in the marvelous NEMO Museum. If you're ever there, I highly recommend you going, whether you got kids or not. At the end of our day with Lucas, he and I were chatting, and he told me about a new kids book that he's coming out with this fall. It'll be out in October, and it is hysterical and disgusting on kids' terms, and I think you'll like it as a parent as well. When I heard about that, plus an outrageous Guinness Book of World Record attempt he's also going to make in mid-October in conjunction with the launch of his kids' book, I just knew we had to get him on the show because I knew you would love him. So on today's show, you are going to learn from Lucas how to use your business story to connect with the kid in all of us, the importance of testing your stories while trusting your intuition, and finally, Lucas asks, what is your big whoopee cushion idea? That's right. We'll cover that at the end of the show. So let's get underway with Lucas Keijning on this week's edition of the Business of Story. Hey, Lucas, welcome to Business of Story. So great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Park. Thanks for having me.
As I mentioned in the intro, you and I got a chance to meet when we were over there with Arizona State University in the course that I teach in the Executive Masters for Sustainability Leadership. And you opened up yourself in the museum to us and our students for the day. And I got to tell you, the NEMO Museum is like no kids' science museum I've ever been in. How long have you worked there? And give us a little bit of backstory about what it is you do there.
So I've been working there for almost 9 years now, and I'm an exhibition developer. So I develop exhibitions and workshops for kids and make demos for adults as well. And my background is in science communication. So the things I love is science itself, and then especially trying to have kids and adults experiment with science and with ordinary stuff in their life to see how the world works.
And have you always focused on kids?
Most of the time, I've been working for, I think, 15 years now in this field, and most of the time it was with kids. But I've also done quite quite some work with adults, so with demonstrations and lectures and quizzes, stuff like that.
I always say that we never grow out the kid in us, and you can be in a conference room and be surrounded by 50 and 60-year-olds, and boy, sometimes you see that 12-year-old in them come to the surface. What is it about working with kids and storytelling to kids that fascinates you and that you bring to your work to get them fascinated about science?
Yeah, I think one of the things I like a lot about the way kids think is that they're not their heads are not so much filled with how would you say it, things that are supposed to be and then supposed between quotation marks to be in a specific way. Kids are eager to explore how the world works and why things are how they are, and I like that. And I think that if you make a certain atmosphere for adults in which they can do the same thing and question certain things that they think they know, but maybe they are different than they think. I think for adults, they love to experiment as well and be a kid in that way. So yeah, that's what I try in my work at NEMO, and I think with my children books as well.
Well, in NEMO, too, when you're there, I'm struck by the architecture because it looks like the bow of a ship, and maybe the stern has sort of sunk in the harbor there in Amsterdam, but this beautiful bluish bow comes up. And what is it, about 5 stories of a science center? And in each level, you just have the most amazing exhibits. It's almost like you feel like you were in the middle of a video game playing in laboratories and studying about the brain and certainly sustainability. Tell us a little bit more about what is sort of the design ethic or the storytelling ethic behind NEMO that you guys use to both attract kids and adults for that matter.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, many people think as NEMO as being a ship, but actually there's a tunnel going underneath NEMO. And what Renzo Piano did, the Italian architect, he made a sort of like symmetrical drawing of it. So the tunnel has the same slide or slope, if you like, as NEMO itself. So it goes in the opposite direction. And what we do at NEMO now is every story has its own, or every floor has its own sort of theme. So first you start off with what experimenting and what science actually is, and then you go up, and then it's about how the world around us, how we shape that world. So it's about technological things and mathematics and logistics, stuff like that. And every floor you go up, there's a different theme. And it's a bit like the first floor, or actually the second floor. We call it the first floor in Dutch. It's a bit confusing. There you have it's almost like a scientific playground. You can touch everything. You can rotate stuff. There's a giant chain reaction that goes off every second hour. Everything is moving and swirling around, and we try to have the kids and the adults to be indulged in the experiments and to get them excited about it.
And you've got one experience there that I don't think you would be able to pull off in the States anywhere. I think it's uniquely Dutch, and it's helping kids understand teen facts about sexuality and reproduction. And what struck me about it is you walk into it as if you're walking into a peep show. So you guys really bring the social side of this that they experience around the world in Amsterdam, whatever, and have fun with it, but it's very explicit too. So tell us a little bit about that particular exhibition, because it's just something I don't know that America could pull off.
Yeah. We hear that a lot from American visitors, or even from other countries. So this is part of Teen Facts, the exhibition, like you said, and you have to use a coin. You have to be between 12 and 18 years to enter the peep show, and it's kind of explicit, but at the same time not really explicit. So we have a video on a screen that shows a pairing animals, but you don't see the genitals, for example. But it's explicit enough for kids to understand what they see. And we have like the wooden dolls. Maybe you know them from from your doctor or your physiotherapist.
Oh, yeah, I got a picture of your display of your wooden dolls. I'll put them on the notes here. But yeah, they're fairly explicit too.
They are, right? Yeah, but at the same time, it's just a wooden doll. So it's all a bit tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it's very serious, because we think at NEMO, and I think in Holland as a whole, or at least many parts of society, that it's very important for kids and for adults as well, also for kids, to have an idea how sexuality works and how different kinds of sexuality work. Think about homosexuality or the different styles of interest in people, and we want to explain them how they can go about that, and they don't have to be ashamed about it. That it's a thing that everybody shares, and that it's important to keep yourself healthy and like lucky in that respect. So yeah, and luckily enough, in Holland we can do that. There's a few schools, mostly religious schools, that have a problem with it. But most of the people are really happy to have their kids like play around there and experiment with those things.
Well, and when we were there, it was overrun with school kids. It was so much fun. But, I found that the adults throughout the entire NEMO Museum, I think, were having as much fun with your science exhibitions and how you can actually get involved in this stuff as the kids were. And I got the sense it's so colorful, it's so hands-on, that it really does bring out the kid in all of us to go through and explore science and technology and look at the fun impacts that we have in the world.
Mm-hmm. That's true, yeah.
So when you were putting in a new exhibit, take us through your creative thought process and how does story come involved? Because I really got the sense that when a visitor goes through this, that you are experiencing a story versus a museum just telling you about science.
Yeah. So one of the exhibits we made like 2 years ago is about like a fairly Dutch exhibit, if you like. You see the land of the Netherlands. It's a table, and you have a projector projecting water and the land on this table, and the table has like a relief. So there's rivers flowing through, and there's you have the dikes which protect us from the water, and all this water is virtual, so it's just a projection. So what we did, we made holes in the dikes, and what happens? You might know that the Netherlands is like almost half of the water, or half of the land is the surface is below sea level. So and also below the level of the rivers, of course.
Well, isn't there a famous line from your country that is, God created the universe, but the Dutch created the Netherlands?
Yeah. That's a quote I know. Yeah.
And by the way, it's one of the reasons why we go over there every year with ASU in our school at sustainability, because of the amazing work you all do working with nature, living in and around what could be a hostile environment with all the water you deal with, but some of the really incredible sustainability work that your organizations, your museums, your businesses are doing. So I think NEMO's kind of an extension of that. But go ahead, tell us about this display.
So the thing is, there's actually no text or no instructions with this exhibit. So there's some background telling people about how dikes work, how polders work, and a polder is then the piece of land that's below sea level. But the instructions are not there. So what happens is the kids and adults, they gather around the table, and they see if they take away one of the sandbags. There's like actual little sandbags, almost as big as your hand or even smaller. And if you take them out of the holes in the dike, a sensor will detect that, and then the water, like the virtual water, will flow into the polders and will make the city that was there disappear, the projected city that is, and also the forest maybe, or the rural area. And so we tell the story about Holland in a very interactive way. So some of the kids will try to make the whole of the country wet, for example. But then other kids will come and say, well, we have to make the polder dry again, and they have to. The funny thing is they have to work together because there's some pumps which you can use to pump the water out, but there's only a few of them. So in a way, it tells the story of Holland. In Holland, we're used, especially in the past, and I think nowadays still, to work together to keep the country dry, and we have to work together to accomplish that. And so I like the fact that it's telling a story, but it's showing and not telling, in a way.
Well, it gets them involved, and they become an active participant in the story as they are. Some guys are moving sandbags one location, and someone's trying to say, no, we got to protect the land here, move it over there, but they get to see it. And what's amazing is the technology of how you have brought that together so that they can interact with it on a physical level, but then the computers kick in and move the water accordingly. I mean, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. It's quite. We work together with a Dutch game developer, Monobanda, and they made a terrific job with first they had a game with sand, and you could, how would you say that, like grab the sand and make mountains, for example, and then the sensor would detect that the mountain was higher, and then it would project a different color on the mountain, and it's really fascinating to make your own world in that kind of way.
Well, the one other exhibit that really caught my eye was like a 3-story Rube Goldberg kinetic machine where there was no technology involved other than the launching of a rocket. And of course, it set everything else in motion. And for those of you that are wondering what a Rube Goldberg game or machine is, have you ever played the game Mousetrap? It's a famous, American game. I grew up playing it where you hit a ball and it just sets everything in motion. And you have this, and it's, 3 or 4 stories right in the middle of the museum. And you have kids just surrounding that, going up flight after flight of stairs, watching this whole machine that takes, 5 minutes to run its whole course?
Yeah. Even less, I guess. Yeah.
But it was so much fun.
Oh, yeah. So it's about like 5 minutes. And the thing is, we always say to a kid can be the cause of the reaction, and the effect is like you said, the rocket that goes up, and it's amazing. And the kids just most of the time the kid will throw over a little domino. Do you say domino stone or like a domino?
Mm-hmm. Get the domino effect of it starts something in motion.
Yeah, and then you get Action Reaction Man, for example, that has a spiky thing in his hand that makes the balloon pop, and then there's balls going around and making loopings, and there's the chair with flare goes around and ticks something over. Yeah, it's quite amazing. I like it.
I have some video of it too, just from shop. I think I was on the top floor because I couldn't get down around it on my iPhone, but I'll include that in the show notes as well.
Cool.
So in all of your experience doing this in the book that you're publishing, and we're going to talk about that in a second, what do you think is truly the secret to connect with kids and get them involved in, it's higher level thinking, but using story to connect with them, and by the same token, connecting with that kid in all of us to be able to connect and communicate high level information?
Yeah. What is it? That's a very good question, I think. I think one of the things we try to do at NEMO is to connect to the ordinary life of kids and the way they think and the things that are relevant to them. In Dutch we say belevingswereld, and that's I'm not sure how to translate it into English. It's like the world of their experience, sort of. So things that are important to them or that fascinate them. So in a way, for example, like a rocket is not a thing they will see in their ordinary life or every day, but it's a thing that if they see the moon, for example, and they think, how could I get to the moon? And then the rocket is like the simple question, simple answer, and then simple between quotation marks. So, and that makes it relevant for them that, for example, like a rocket is something that they can imagine being inside of, or that they could build a rocket, for example. And I think that it's important to always have, how would you say that, to connect to something that fascinates kids, but at the same time makes it possible for them to think about it. So you could also do, like in Science Museum, you could also show stuff from science that is really complex or really above their heads. But if they don't, they won't feel a sense of ownership. Then I guess so. It's important to have them feel that sense of ownership, I guess, and that they can do something with it, but at the same time be amazed by it. Something like that.
Well, and Lucas, I think what you're talking about from the world experience is what we talk about a lot, is from the audience's point of view. What is their experience? Where are they coming from? And how can you connect your story with their story? So in this case, too, with kids, they don't have, obviously, a lot of world experience. And so a lot of this stuff is brand new to them, but you've got to find some ways to bring this science into their world so they have a point of relation with it that they can jump off from. And I think one of the areas that I really like, too, is your optical illusions wall, because you could get up there and see one thing, and as you get closer to the wall, you see something else. And it had a way of, for me anyways, of really pulling my world into your world and then making you think, how in the heck did that optical illusion happen? Then you explain how that goes down. So tell us about your book. I had a chance to read it the other day, and I got to tell you, I'm no prude. But you have a lot of fun with farts and burps and smacking. And, tell us about the slobs and what was your plan to connect this with kids?
Yeah. So, the actual occasion, or the reason that I ended up writing this book was a woman in the train from Amsterdam, where I work, to Utrecht, where I live, and she was munching on a candy ball, and she did it quite loudly. So I was fascinated by this. There's this thing, misophonia. I'm not sure if you say it like that in English, but there's quite a bunch of people that get really irritated or even like physically almost sick or unwell by listening to people that munch or that eat an apple, for example. I think I have this just ever so slightly. So I was amazed, but at the same time quite distracted or irritated by this woman. But then I thought there's more people that have this, and I was busy writing children's books. I'm not sure why, but I thought this would be a cool thing for a children's book, because children know that it's not a good thing to munch. At least in Holland, it's not a good thing. It's also cultural, of course. And then the guy who's farting all the time, that he came about quite easily, I think. So it's mostly intuitive that I came about this book. But I had this idea that kids as well as adults would like it, and that they would recognize the weird, how you say it, behavior of people and irritating behavior of people, and the fact that people are always trying, or many times people are trying, especially spouses, to correct the other person. So I got fascinated by that idea.
When I looked it up as you were talking, it's misophonia, MISOPHONIA. I've never heard that before. And its description is, hatred of slurping and loud eating. Yeah. And it has its name, misophonia. Now, why don't you take our listeners through the premise of the book, and what are you ultimately trying to impart to your kid readers? And their parents, for that matter. Yeah.
So there's a spoiler alert in this part then. So actually, the book goes about about being together and in the end accepting each other for who they are, and accepting all their failures and all their how would you say that,
their foibles.
There you go. Like on the surface, it's a funny book because it's about farting, and it's about smacking, lip smacking, which many people, at least in Holland, find funny, think is funny. But at the same time, it has a psychological psychological layer. So what happens is that in every little chapter, there's either the husband or the wife, so Mr. or Mrs. Slob, they go and try to change the behavior of the other by, for example, Mrs. Slob will lock up her husband in the toilet, and she thinks that if he stays there for 3 hours, then in his own stench, he will stop, and actually he will realize how stinky that is, how disgusting that is. But then she ends up like standing next to the toilet, and her husband is just reading his magazine about rods and fishing rods and about rivers to fish in. And then afterwards she has to go to the toilet. So then she experienced like the horrendous smell of her husband. So it backfires on her, and in every chapter it has the same structure. So the one is trying something, and then it backfires exactly to them, or I think it backfires to them, if you say.
Yeah, and in reading it, I was laughing and cringing at the same time. I couldn't even imagine hanging with the slobs.
Yeah, I think they're horrible, but at the same time, because I take, or at least I try to take the reader into the mind of one of the slobs, and I sort of explain them or show them how much they hate the behavior of their spouse, and you feel a bit with them, or you can feel empathy for them, but it goes back and forth. So I try to play with that tension. So at the same time, you think, well, they're like horrendous people, or horrible and very slobby people, but you also, when I wrote the book, I also loved the slobs, because they're in their way they're really trying to get their world better and try to be a good person, or not really a good person, but they just try to make something work, but it doesn't work out. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. They're just trying to be themselves. And this woman on the train, 6 years ago, didn't even realize that she smacking her lips, eating the candy, was the inspiration for your Slobs book.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I mentioned her in the book, but I'm not sure if she has read the book, or even noticed that she was smacking that hard. So.
What are the reactions you've gotten from kids that have read your book?
They like it, and especially the interactive book that I've made now, which comes with the images that you can touch, and which make a noise if you touch them, or make the sound that comes with the picture.
Yeah, they fart and they slop and they smack their lips and everything else. It's quite fun.
So and kids love that. But I also hear that they like the ending. So in the ending is it comes to the fact that Mrs. Slob, who farts all the time, without realizing what he's doing, he starts to munch as hard as his wife, or even harder. And he thinks,
you're not going to give away the ending, are you?
Oh, I am. Oh,
yeah. No spoiler alerts.
Okay.
We got to let our listeners go through all the disgusting munching and farting.
Oh yeah.
And meet the slobs and live with the slobs to get the lesson and see and figure out what happens in the end. By the way,
yeah,
it was pretty diabolical what Mrs. Slob did to Mr. Slob when he was sleeping towards the end of the book, I will say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what about parents? Adults read this. I got to tell you, like I said, I was laughing and cringing at the same time. It's pretty graphic. It's quite funny. What is the reaction you're hearing from adults and parents to the book?
So I think the reaction which I got most was, this is me and my husband, or this is me and my friend, or this is my parents, or many people sort of how would you say, see other people or themselves in the slobs. So that's funny, because in a way, if you would ask them like literally, nobody wants to be like the slobs, especially if you look to if you see the images of them and look how they behave. But many people what's the word?
They relate to them.
Yeah. So
you've taken these behaviors to the absolute extreme and disgustingness in this book, but people can, in their own little way, say, "Oh yeah, that's me," or "That's my husband or wife," or whatever. And And even if it's not the disgusting behaviors, I suppose they're able to connect and say, yeah, there are some things that drive me crazy about them, but I got to get over it because that's just them.
Yeah. And it's funny. And I was hoping for this reaction, but I was even amazed how many people relate to that in that way. And they say, oh yeah, that's me. And also they were asking me, of course, if it was autobiographical or if it had something to do with people I know. But
which slob are you?
Yeah. But I always say no comment on that.
So from your experience, Lucas, of designing science exhibits and displays for kids to really connect with kids and the parents that bring them, what did you learn from that helped guide and inform the creation of the Slob's book?
I think there's there was one guy in Holland. There's a Dutch interviewer, and he once told us in a workshop that there's two things that always keep people interested or always interest people, and that's it's sex and it's your I'm not sure what the English word for this, but your the thing that you have to go for the toilet for.
Yeah, disgust.
Yeah, well, not disgust, but like your inner workings of your body and that the products of that. To say it in that way, I think in NEMO we do the same kind of thing. We're quite liberal in what we talk about and how we talk about it. And in my books, or in this book especially, I just show it and I just talk about it. And many people actually like that. They say, "Well, it's disgusting," but at the same time, they like it. That's my experience so far.
And one of the most powerful emotions that we can trigger in people when telling stories is the emotion of disgust. Even if you're doing it in a fun way, like you've done with your book, it's still, like I said, I laughed and I cringed at some of the things going on in there. But recently read a book called The Righteous Mind, and it talks about a lot of the triggers that go on. And disgust plays a big trigger in our life because it's a survival mechanism. When folks had leprosy back in the day, nobody wanted to be around them. It was disgusting, and disgust helps keep us alive. When you were dealing with corpses, they had to go about a very special way. We still do to this day because of this disgust. It helps keep us alive. It's a survival mechanism. So in essence, you are using that survival mechanism, but in a fun and funny way that people can relate to.
Yeah. It's funny. Like many kids are intrigued, you say, or like are very interested in things that disgust most people. And it's interesting because it's a part of your life and part of your body as well. The things I'm talking about are just things that everybody has in her body or his body. But we learn over time, that some things are allowed to do and some things are not allowed to do. And it's interesting how that goes about. And I think kids, mainly kids, but also adults are they always try to figure out where the border is, or what they can do and what they cannot do. And I think in my mind, I always have kept this fascination alive, I guess. So what the border is and why that border is there. For example, if you go to China, for example, it's very normal to lip smack and to munch, and it's even sometimes like considered as a way to tell other people that you like your food. Whereas here in Holland or in the US, it's not that normal to do that, or even this like thought of disgusting. And I think that's interesting because it tells something about something about culture, I guess, but also about what it is to be a human and what good behavior is, I guess. So yeah.
So you're exploring these borders of social norms, not only in the Netherlands, but the world over. And you talked about that inspiration of both talking about sex and disgust or flatulence. And really, those are two very key motivational factors in storytelling: is procreation, again, the survival of our species, and disgust. Once you're alive, you use disgust to stay alive. You're doing this, but you're doing it in very fun and enlightening and interesting ways. But there's two really powerful themes. It sounds like it kind of pervades not only the book, but really, now that you mentioned, a lot of what I saw at NEMO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. It's what we do in NEMO is we try to fascinate people, and sometimes we use like very strong emotions, like disgust, but also like anxiety, for example, to get that point across, to have kids and adults like really experience the phenomena. Yeah,
anxiety. That's a great point, because you create the tension or the story tension in it and then relieve it through the answer of what you're delivering to them within the exhibit, essentially. All right, now you are taking flatulence to literally a Guinness Book of World Record level. Tell us about that in celebration of the launch of the Slobs.
Yeah, so because I'm quite new in this field, and not so many people know my name as a children's author, I thought I need to have like a big stunt to get my name across, and especially the book across and the story of the book. So I'm trying to, attempting to break the world record in the biggest whoopee cushion of the world.
The biggest whoopee cushion, those pink things you put on someone's chair, they sit down, it sounds like they're farting.
That's right, yeah. And normally they're like, 10 inches wide, and there is a world record actually, so people might be amazed by that. But there is a world record set by people from New Zealand, and they had a whoopee cushion of 6 meters. So I'm going for 7.5 meters. So how much is that in feet? So it's like roughly 8 feet wider, I guess, than getting very technical now.
7.5 meters, thank God for the interwebs, is 24.6063 feet. So right around 24 and a half feet.
Yeah. So it's due on October 15th in Utrecht, where I live. And the idea is that around like 40 kids will jump onto the whoopee cushion at the same time. And then it makes like one big fart, and and that's the idea is to launch the interactive ebook of Mr. and Mrs. Slob at that time, and I will launch like the Dutch version, but also the American version.
And you'll actually have Guinness Book of World Record on hand there to make sure that you pull this off?
So not exactly. They know about it, and they gave me, I'm sort of like authorized to do it, or they gave me the green lights. But to have people from the World Record, Guinness Book of Records, it's quite a amount of money you have to pay them to be with it. So what I do is I have people there that can do a testimony, and I'll make pictures of it, and of course videos and stuff like that. And then the Guinness Book of Records, if they agree on that, and I guess they will, if at least the world record. If I break the record and if all goes well, then I'll be in the Guinness Book of Records.
And Lucas, you and I are going to do a Facebook Live. So I'm going to broadcast it here throughout the world. But on this end, you've got someone that's going to be on that end holding the camera up. And we're going to put together a Facebook Live on October 15th for the Guinness Book of World Record breaking whoopee cushion fart.
Yeah. That's
I can't wait.
It's a big headline, isn't it?
It's huge. I'm going to have to figure out the time difference, though. I got a hunch I'm going to be up like at 3 a.m. on this end, but I'm going to do it because I want to witness it live.
Cool. So cool that you're doing that.
Wow, so much fun. So when it all comes down to it, what could you share with our listeners, 3 tips, if they want to connect their stories to kids and the kids in all of us? What do you recommend?
I think the one of the tricky parts is that I think the ideas of the book or your stories have to be good, and have to be inspiring for kids. And it's quite tricky because most of the ideas I come up with or that pop up in my head are not they're not made in a conscious way. Most of them just pop up out of the blue, and then I think, oh, this might be cool for kids. But what you could do is that if you have those ideas and if you feel that it might be interesting for kids, you can just go to kids in the library or at schools or your nephews and nieces and ask them, would this be cool for a children's book? Do you think this idea, what do you think about that? But it's also tricky at the same time, because sometimes an idea is just that, it's just an idea and you have to like elaborate on it. We have that at NEMO as well. So if we come up with an idea for an exhibit or an exhibition, sometimes if you ask kids or even adults if they would like that, they might be not so interested in it. Whereas if you really elaborate on it and you make it beautiful or you do something which is really interactive, it might be different. So it's a kind of I think you have to trust on your intuition as well, if something is feasible and if something might be interesting for kids. And sometimes an idea which is not at the moment is not good enough or not interesting enough might get better if you elaborate more on it. So it's a bit of a double message, I guess.
So it's kind of test with caution and trust with your intuition.
I guess so. Yeah.
Any other last insights?
I think, well, what I like is that, especially with the world record attempt, I see that, or I hear from people that they like the idea and that they like the idea that I'm trying to take a big step in that. And I think if you really want to go for something, it might be worth trying to figure out what your big whoopee cushion might be, or what something that gets you inspired, and which makes for that people see what you're doing and what you're trying to bring into the world, something like that.
By the way, where does a guy get a 24.5 foot, 7.5 meter whoopee cushion made?
Well, it's done in Holland. There's this one guy. There's a few actually, but there's one guy who's very specialized in working with PVC. So he has a big heater, and he can not gluing, but how we like thermally connecting sort of the PVC together. And he has a very big hole where he can do that. So. Yeah. And
do you make more than one in case your first one pops?
No. So there's just one go, and
so it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
It's either going to go flat or you're going to get major flatulence.
Yeah, and I hope for the latter one. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Lucas, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people get your book?
So it will be online in the week after the world record. So it's due in I think the third week of October, and they can see it on iBooks of Apple, and I'm also trying to have it on Amazon.com and other major distributors of ebooks in America.
So that'll be the third week of October. That's the first time that they can get their hands on it. And do you have a website or anywhere else to send them?
Yeah, so that's Mr. and Mrs. Slob, and that's so with MRANDMRSSLOB.com. Mr. and Mrs. Slob.
MRANDMRSSLOB.com.
There you go. Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Slob. And even though we're going to have your whoopee cushion on Facebook Live, I'm sure you'll have some video of that after the fact that they can see on the website as well.
Yeah. I'll make sure it's all covered, and there's lots of footage and photos. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, Lucas, after about 110 shows, I never thought I was going to have a Guinness Book of World Record whoopee cushion athlete on the program. So it's great to have you here.
Thanks a lot, Park, for being on your show.
Absolutely. And I can't wait for October 15th and going Facebook Live with that.
Okay, cool.
All right. Thank you all for listening to this edition of Business of Story. Hope you enjoyed today's show. It's always fun. You know, I literally try to go around the world to find interesting story artists like Lucas to help us better understand how to connect with people on their terms through the stories we tell them so that we can connect, educate them, engage them, have fun, and actually move them to action. And if I can help you do that in your world, visit me over at businessofstory.com. You can learn about my brand consulting services, workshops I can do with your team, or keynote speaking. Plus, I've got a ton of tools there for you, so knock yourself out. And finally, if you love what you're hearing here on Business of Story podcast, please share it with your world. Let a friend know about it. Recommend me over to somebody else. That's how we grow our world, and I really appreciate you listening and sharing it with those who you think would benefit from the Business of Story. So I look forward to being back with you again next week. And until then, I want to remind you that the most potent story you are ever going to tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Story on, my friends.